Good evening, everybody. This evening I'd like to have a little discussion about one of the things that I feel like is probably the death of most farmers and most farms, and really most small businesses, but I see it mostly in farms. And I'd like to start with a little story of when I first got started. When I first got started welding on my own, I remember it was my first, well, it wasn't my first welding machine, it was actually my second welding machine, but it was the first one that was worth anything, okay? The first welding machine, we won't talk about that. That was a lesson well learned. I shouldn't have bought that one. But the first welding machine that I ever used in production and to start my business with. So I bought this machine, and because it was my first machine, and it was nostalgic to me. And if you know anything about welding pipe, you know that a lot of pipe welders, they like the old red face 200s. Now all the 200s are good machines and coveted machines, but the red face 200s, those were the truly coveted machines. That's all of the 60 model machines. So everything from year 1960 to 1969, if it's my understanding. My first one was a 1961 welding machine, and I loved it. Man, I just absolutely loved it. But the story is that machine caused me so much grief. I had so many problems with that thing. I rebuilt the motor, and of course at that point I was young. So first I rebuilt the top end myself, and then afterwards, later on down the road, I ended up having to have the whole thing rebuilt. So then I paid for the whole thing to be rebuilt. And there's just one thing after another, all sorts of problems with that machine. And I just kept on, not only did I spend a lot of money on the machine, but I also let the machine cost me money. And the way it costed me money was, not only did it cost me money for me paying people to repair it or to buy parts for it and things like that, but it also costed me money simply because of time. That was a lot of time that I spent not working or not accepting jobs and going out and getting jobs, you know, because I was a contractor at that point. So I contracted my own jobs out. And so that costed me a lot. And at that point, I had a lot of nostalgia to the machine. It was my first machine, and I guess I had a certain love for it, for the fact that it was my machine. It was my first machine that I really enjoyed. I loved the way it welded, but I also loved the fact that it was a coveted machine of other people. So other people that saw it really coveted that. Later on in life, well, actually just a few short years, I started realizing, because I would see, I would see my older brother. He had a machine that was not really necessarily a coveted machine at all, but it was a good machine, and it did the job well. It wasn't quite as perfect in every single aspect, but it did the job well, and he made a lot of money with that machine, and he hardly ever had any problems with it. And so I learned a valuable lesson there, and that was to not become too nostalgic on one piece of equipment. And the reason that story is important, because that's one of the biggest downfalls I see a lot of farmers make. They will become too attached to A, a piece of equipment, or B, a certain animal or something like that. You know, you'll see it a lot. This happens worse with homesteaders when it comes to animals. You'll see someone, they'll buy like a cow, and they'll plan on, or a little calf, they'll plan on raising it up for their own meat, or a little piglet, or a little, a certain, you know, sometimes it's a rabbit or a couple of rabbits or something. My mom used to do this quite a bit, and that's not to hate on anybody. Some people can't handle that, but it's a point that I'm trying to make. That the point is valid regardless, okay? When you buy something and then you become too attached to it, it becomes a money sink, okay? It becomes something that you continually soak up a lot of your money, your time as well. But not only that, it's all the stress that goes into it, okay? So I do actually own a red face now. I actually own a 69 red face, okay? I've owned several red faces at this point. I've learned my lesson on that. At least I hope I have. And that machine's a very good machine. I bought the machine. It's done very well. It had low hours on it. I've had very few problems so far, you know, and you're going to have a few issues here and there. But because of that, now I'm very cautious. You know, I'll find, and y'all know that I use older equipment. So I'll find older equipment that's still in good shape, and I do not get attached to any of it, okay? I use it, and I don't want anybody to think that, I don't want you to get it mixed up. Like, there's a difference in being attached to something and not letting it go when you should, and valuing an older piece of equipment that is valuable, okay? Because I have quite a few pieces of old equipment that I would not let go. I would be very cautious about letting it go, even if it started to break down. That's an issue I've seen a lot of younger guys get into. They'll see, you know, like their grandpa or something like that, they'll see him get nostalgic to an older piece of equipment, or be very tight. They're very tight with their money, and so they don't get rid of that old piece of equipment. They dislike that, and so they're more likely to buy equipment when maybe they shouldn't, maybe when they don't have the money. So that's the opposite end of the spectrum. You know, that's a story for a different day, but that's a problem that you can get into as well. So you want to be cautious with that. But all you want to do is you want to get your equipment or your animals or whatever it is. And this advice really goes for anyone in business, any small business at all. But I just see it a lot more in the farming community. And then, like I said, I did see it quite a bit, and I saw a lot of other young welders struggle with the same thing I did, you know. So just keep that in mind. When you buy an animal, or you buy an older tractor, or you buy a welding machine, or you buy a certain piece of equipment, whatever it is that you're purchasing on your farm, you have to think of it as an investment. And that investment has to bring back cash flow. It has to benefit the farm. Okay, if it's not continually benefiting you and the farm, it needs to go down the road. You need to get rid of it, you know, and sometimes that means losing money. Now, you want to try to keep that from happening, but every now and then, it's better to lose a little bit of money and realize that, okay, I made a mistake on this, and it's better to lose a little bit of money than it is to spend years and years of grief and using lots and lots of money on that, okay? So you kind of have to figure that one out for yourself, you know. For myself, I have several pieces of older equipment that I have, you know, slowly built up. I really like them. I know them well, so I can keep them fixed and keep them maintained, and I can do that work for myself, you know. But I have to slowly build those things up to where I know that, okay, this one's a really good one. It's low hours, it's doing me well. And then or if I buy something else, you know, like there was a time I had bought a MIG machine. It was a small MIG machine. Didn't like it, okay? Didn't serve me well. Eventually, I realized, okay, it's got to go down the road. I'm going to have to get another one. I have to get something else that I don't have to fight all the time, okay? So instead of fighting that one, you kind of have to know that delicate balance. And it's the same thing with animals. Sometimes they need to go down the road. Sometimes it's ready to, you know, put them in the freezer. Sometimes it's ready to sell them down the road. Sometimes they're just not right for your farm, like if you're running an electric fence or something. Maybe they're right for someone else and they're just not right for you, you know. And sometimes that does mean losing money. You don't want to make a habit of that. Usually you can work it out to where you don't ever lose any. Now, you might not gain some, okay, but to get rid of the headache, to get the headache gone, it's well worth every bit of that. So I felt like that was something that really needed to be said. I see a lot of people, I'll go to different people's farms and I visit with them and stuff, and this is something that I've seen a lot. And I've struggled with it myself. So I felt like that needed to be said. I really do hope that that will help somebody. You know, y'all, you need to think about these things. So guys, as always, please don't forget, like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because that's the only way that you can be sure that you see all of the videos.